Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Very excited about our guest today. Serena Shoup is here from Shoup CPA, and we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, which is culture. But before we kind of go down that path, Serena, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your firm and some of your background?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. This is exciting as a listener of the podcast. So I am Serena Shoup. I am a CPA.
The only listener? The
What
only
was that?
listener of the podcast? Are you the only listener of the
podcast?
Yeah.
You're the one. We found her.
Okay, we got her.
Finally. Yeah. So I'm a CPA. I actually came up in corporate, so not a Big Four background, but more in industry. I've worked in manufacturing and in biotech. When I left my corporate career, I was the controller at a biotech company in San Diego, and left to have more kids and knew that I was probably never going to go back to corporate. And so it was like my opportunity to make my dream happen of becoming an entrepreneur. And even though I have an accounting degree and all that kind of stuff, I've always wanted to start a business. But it didn't really ever dawn on me that I should just do accounting because that's my background. But here we are. That's what I ended up doing. It was kind of on accident, even though I knew I wasn't going to go back. I knew I wanted to start a business. I kept thinking oh, maybe I'll start a coffee shop or some other random thing. But what ended up happening is after I had my second daughter, I started just kind of tinkering around on Upwork and seeing bookkeeping jobs. And I was like, well, I kind of worked really hard to get my CPA license. So maybe I should just keep that fresh. I'll just help some small businesses. I worked at a really small tax firm towards the beginning of my career. Mm-hmm. And so I had experience working with small mom and pop shops, like little restaurants and auto repair shops and things like that. And so it wasn't foreign to me to be able to talk to small business owners. And also my dad's an entrepreneur and stuff. So it's kind of in my blood. And so I was like, well, this seems super easy. So let's just do this for a while, stay fresh. And I can't just be chill about stuff and just was like, let's make this into a business instead of freelancing. So that's kind of how it started. Although I will say, even though I went full force and started building a business, I still was very intentional about keeping it part-time, which is kind of, I guess, counterintuitive for some people. But for me, it was well, if I'm going to do this thing on my own, I want it to be on my terms. Sure. So I kind of went against the general advice out there of wait until you have $100K in revenue or a certain number of clients to start hiring. No, I hired a helper, someone to do part-time bookkeeping when I had 5 clients because I was well, it's either I have to hire a babysitter for more hours and put more time into my business to support these clients, or I could just find a bookkeeper and employ somebody else, help them, also help me, and not spend as much time in the business. So that's what I did. Pretty much from the beginning, I have had a team.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. So you said you had a team from the beginning. So just so we understand the background here. So how large is your team now, and how many people, and kind of what are those roles that you have employed?
Yeah. So I still have my original part-time bookkeeper. And I also have a part-time staff accountant who I am training and getting to the point where he can be more of that controller level. And I have an integrator who is kind of my operations person. She helps with both businesses. So I run a mentoring business and the bookkeeping stuff. So she supports me in all of it. She's full-time. And then we have a part-time assistant that kind of helps wherever she's needed as well. And she's an accounting student. So Yeah, she helps on both sides as well.
Great.
Yeah.
So I forgot to mention early on that Jody is here as well for our listeners. So Jody, I know you've talked a couple times already, but for those hearing the other voice, that is Jody as always. So
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
So let's start going down the road of culture. So I know, in the pre-conversation, you were talking a little bit about, how important it is to create or the works of creating a different culture. You want to kind of talk about what the word, because different can mean a lot of different things. So let's talk about what different culture means for you.
Yeah. For me, it was like creating that culture that everyone dreams of and really wants to have in corporate, and people say that they have it in their companies, but when it comes down to it, it doesn't really exist for a lot of companies. And it's funny because on our team call today, we meet as a team every week on Zoom, and then of course we're hanging out in Slack together too because we're all virtual. On our team call today, we always go around and share wins and we share our own win, and then we give a win to someone else on the team. Basically, if someone else is embodying our core values, then we kind of shout them out. Or if it's just they've gone above and beyond to help another team member, we just like to showcase that. But I was talking about everyone is always we love working here. We love the culture that you've created. And I'm like, it's also because of you guys. But please, as we grow, I want to make sure that this culture remains, because I've been in startup environments that it feels like we have that tight knit culture, and then we start growing too fast. And then we start hiring people that don't really embody the culture just because we need bodies in the seats. And I don't ever want to get to that point. So I was like, I'm going to count on you guys to hold me accountable. But I guess for me, that culture is really truly recognizing that everyone is human, and not to expect people to leave the rest of their lives at the door when they come to work, that we can continue to support each other even when stuff is kind of awry in our personal lives. We can count on each other to lean on each other. If something is crazy in our personal lives, we can all cover for you as a team when it comes to work, so that's one less thing that will stress you out. And so you can really tend to what's going on in your personal life, because we've all had those moments where it's I'm kind of just losing it over here in my personal life. I could just use a little extra support at work so that I can take care of whatever is happening at home. And so that's the main thing of truly offering that to people, and offering different ways of being flexible besides just the typical benefits like insurance and things like that.
So do you find that people, because you have that, do you find that people actually work more hours than what you're hoping, because they'll maybe take time off during the day to run the kids to basketball practice or whatever, and then you catch them late at night at home trying to catch up on what they missed during the day, and in the process ending up working more hours than what? If that doesn't happen, then how do you prevent that, I guess?
Yeah. So for the most part, my whole team is part-time, except my one full-time employee. And they balance things pretty well. They still end up working about the same amount of hours, and they're able to work when it works best for them. And I think the output is much greater than if it was more structured, if that makes sense. And that might not necessarily work for every personality type. I've certainly had team members in the past that they needed more structure than that. So it's not a one size fits all. It takes a certain personality to be able to thrive in that kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
So back to that point then. So when you hire, are you looking for that personality, or are you hiring looking for something else, and then you're going to work other people's personality into your culture?
So our hiring is very, there's a skills component, but most of the hiring process is centered around core values and that whole personality. We kind of take people through the ringer to join the team. Initially, my integrator does once we receive an application that followed all the instructions, because there's that filtering process, because attention to detail is very important. Once they pass that whole process, then she does this, like, she'll text them or shoot over an email. Typically it's a text though, like, hey, we just got your application. I'd love to hop on a call, just a very short call, just to make sure we have all the details right, just to kind of see how hungry they are for the job.
Yeah.
That'll say a lot about a person. And then she'll just kind of get a feel for them, like intuition wise, like how they respond on the phone calls and stuff like that in that first little meeting. And if they pass that test, then they get an interview set up with me. And they also get a skills assessment. So in between the interview with me and her, they get an email from me that says, great, you're moving on to the next, the next phase. And that is like answering or doing this assessment that we have, depending on the position. But for the most part, like we're always, going to be hiring for accounting work. So whether that's a staff accountant, a bookkeeper, that sort of thing. We test their actual knowledge. And so we send them some kind of funky financial statements with some mistakes and have them point out the mistakes. And I give them here's the number of mistakes that are definitely in here. You may find more, but this is like the minimum that you need to find. And then I also give them a test on like a client scenario, like, hey, like this is the scenario. We've missed a deadline for sales tax on XYZ client, or rather you've missed the deadline and this is the second time this has happened. So the client is frustrated. How are you going to handle it? And so we ask them to draft an email, and just to kind of get a feel for their communication style and how much ownership they take over mistakes. Yeah.
So if Jody was applying for that, you know exactly what he would say. He'd say, I don't make mistakes. You must have the wrong person, is what he would say in the email.
I've never made one yet, I don't think.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's really just to see like how they would respond and mainly like take ownership for things. There's some people that would literally respond as like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened. We'll make sure that it doesn't happen again. And then there's some people that like are very blamey, like they wouldn't take responsibility in that draft email. So it's like immediately like they're out of the running.
Wow,
because it's a team effort. Even if like you're technically not the one that made the mistake, if you're the person overseeing it, we want to make sure that you would still take ownership and make sure, this is how we would handle it going forward and whatnot. So
No, that's very interesting. Kind of on the competency test, how does that work? Is it adding and subtracting? Because that's all accountants do anyways, right?
Well, since, the week. Yeah, that is all we do, definitely. Since our goal is to get people that will advance and grow with the company, and also we don't just perform bookkeeping services. We give a lot of, advice and things around our clients and how they can run their businesses and interpreting their numbers for them. I give them a set of financial statements that have some mistakes, like retained earnings doesn't tie out and things like that. Negative inventory, glaring mistakes, but also like I give them a set of financial statements that is based on a real client that we have. I just have changed the names and things, so that they can see like the trends of what happens in our clients' businesses. And it's an opportunity for them to also ask me questions about the business on the interview. So I always open that up to like, did you have any questions about this business, or like the things that you saw that looked irregular? Because this is the industry that I work with a lot of course creators. So there's a lot of fluctuation in revenue. And different things aren't in, with launches and whatnot. So it's also an opportunity for me to see how, like, what kind of questions they have and how much they really paid attention to what they were looking at instead of just trying to find mistakes. Because we want people that are analytical as well.
Are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO playbook to enroll now.
Do you keep track of how many people get to that step and just drop and say, okay, yeah, I'm not taking this step? Because I think to your point earlier about like let's test their commitment. Like we've thought about implementing a test, and it's something that I'm working with some people on right now. But like I think the more and more you add into your interview process, the more it shows, okay, we're really looking for serious candidates only here. And so how many people do you think, or do you know how many people get that test? Like, okay, no, I was just looking for an easy job. This is not what I'm looking for.
Usually I'm trying to think back to the last person we hired. We probably got hundreds of applicants that didn't even follow the first instruction, which was a subject line of the email. And so immediately, like, those went in the trash. Like, we didn't even open them if it was just like doing the automatic application on Indeed or whatever. It was like, nope, you actually have to go to our website, read the job description, find the secret subject line, and email a certain person at our firm with your resume. So that filtered out a lot of people. Like, we had hundreds of those, and I think I only ended up interviewing 5 people.
Wow.
That's how much it weeds people out.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
and there were
amazing,
there were a couple of people that did the assessment, and based on the results of them, I ended up not interviewing them. Just because for this one particular position we were looking for, I really did want someone that could grow into being a controller fairly quickly. So if I was interviewing for like a part-time beginner bookkeeping position, I wouldn't have been such a jerk about that. But I was looking for someone specific.
Yeah.
No,
that makes sense.
Yeah. But I remember
you've hired the person. Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I remember when I interviewed as a staff accountant at the small CPA firm, I got a test of financial statements, and I had to do it in person. Like, this was not emailed it to me and I got to do it on my own time like these people get. I went in for the interview, was completely surprised that I was going to be looking at a set of financial statements with just a few years of experience under my belt. So I was like, if I could do that, I can make other people do this too. So,
I love that, Jamie.
Yeah.
Put that in your next interviewing slot.
Yeah, no,
bring some financial.
Yeah, I'm working through it. Yeah, that's one of the things we're working on. Is I think to your point is we're looking for, because we do a lot more on the consulting side of things, and especially at the senior accountant level, what we're looking for is, at that point, you just hope they can do a bank rec and some of these standard things. But really what we're looking for is, can we, if I were to show 3 months of financial statements, and let's just say the one expense had $5,000 in it month 1, $5,000 in it month 2, and then month 3 had 0, and then we show the forecast is $5,000, are they going to catch something like that? And that's the things we're looking for, is like, are they able to look at different sets of numbers, figure out trends, and really come up with questions? And then not only to say, okay, obviously they're missing an expense for this month, but what could have happened? Is it in a different account? Is it, on the balance sheet? Just kind of like really take it to that next level. And so that's kind of the test we're working on creating, is just given those type of things, because really the number one expectation of our senior accountants is, can you review a financial statement and bring them to the CFO with very few errors or explanations of what happened? And so that's kind of the thing we're working on right now.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, and so now that you've interviewed the candidate, and you say, hey, this person is on our team, we love her. You bring her in. What type of how do you do your onboarding? So you're completely remote. It's very similar to us. So how do you do onboarding? Because again, a lot of the people out there are like wondering that exact same thing. But you've never met the person in person, right? You've never shaken their hand,
right?
So how do you know this person? How can you then bring that culture right into the onboarding process?
Yeah. So this last position that we hired for, we like revamped our whole entire process because I was like, I want to build a certain culture. I want to make sure that everyone is on board with our values from the very beginning. So even in the interview process, we talk about our values and make sure that like the questions we're asking will enable people to answer based on their values. And then just how they interact with us throughout the interview process can say a lot too. So we actually ended up hiring a guy for this last round that immediately when he found the job posting on LinkedIn, we had a mutual connection. And before he even applied, he messaged me and was like, I'm going to apply for this position. I just wanted to let you know that to expect my application. I was like, that's pretty awesome. And through the whole process, he was very like, he was communicating about everything. And I was like, that is what I need. I need to know where things stand without having to ask.
Yeah, that's great.
So I knew pretty much as soon as I had my first interaction with him that he was probably the right one for the job. And it just got better throughout the process. But the onboarding, I gave it some time. So I knew I wanted to have someone onboarded or starting to onboard at the end of January. And we actually started recruiting in November. Because I was also like, it's a crazy job market out there. Like, in order to find the right candidate,
crazy right now. Yeah.
I think we needed to be very prepared. So I was like, even though I'm not ready to start paying someone yet, I'm going to start recruiting. And I'm so glad I did. And so he started in January, towards the end of January. And I gave him the offer the beginning of January. And so I had time to then I was like, all right, now I'm going to create like literally an onboarding course. So I'm a course creator. I've taken a lot of courses, a lot of good ones, a lot of bad ones. And I was like, I feel like this is probably the best way to communicate how things are going to work in our company. And then in the future, we can just reuse this, right? The only thing I have to re-record is like the welcome module where I talk about what our goals are for this year. So every year I'll just have to update that first lesson of like, this is what our goal are. I'm very transparent with my team. These are our financial goals. These are the goals for like growing the team. These are the type of clients we like, so that everyone is always on the same page. There's really no reason to not share that information. So I literally created a course to onboard it.
We did the same thing. We know exactly.
Yeah, we did the same thing. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lesson on like our core values and a lesson on who our ideal clients are. And then there's lessons on how we use each of our tools in our business. So like how we specifically use Asana, how we specifically use Slack, all the things that will make them successful in their job, because I have the clarity of it not working out with an employee. And so I was like, how can we do this differently so that from the very beginning, everyone understands what the expectations are on how we use these tools, and all that. So that's what I did. That's how we onboarded. And then we do a weekly one-on-one for the first 3 months. He just hit his 3-month milestone. And so he just got a raise and everything is great.
Wait, a raise? What are you talking about, a raise?
Yeah. So it was a small one, but it's like after the 3-month probation period, since we don't have health insurance benefits yet, we're still pretty small. I haven't implemented that as of yet. I offered because he wanted a certain, he had a salary range in mind. And I was like, well, let's talk about that after you hit your 3 months. I'm going to start you here. And if everything is going swimmingly throughout the 3 months, then you will be at what you wanted, at that point. So it was just a couple dollars an hour, but yeah, I'm happy to accommodate that because he's a good addition to the team.
So with your different modules, how many modules did you have in your training modules for your onboarding? Was it 5, 10, 15?
So 3 modules, but each lesson, there was probably 3 or 4 lessons in each module of 15 minutes. So basically I covered each tool that we use.
So then you had them watch a module.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have them
Yeah.
watch a module, and then from there, then you talked about it, or how did that work, or did you just assume that they understood it?
Yeah. So at the end of each module, there's an assessment. I'm extreme, you guys. There's an assessment at the end of each module to like make sure they understand a few things that I think are important. And then we also, we were meeting weekly, so he had an opportunity to bring questions and all that. So 3 modules, and then after the third, so 1 module a week basically, and then week 1 was really just going through the first module. And then week 2, since he's part-time, he's not spending 40 hours a week with me. I needed to kind of space it out. So then week 2, I started getting him involved in some client work in addition to going through the second module. And we were checking in every week to see where he was having roadblocks. And we would do like a client related training, like hands-on, where I would work through it and then let him drive and work through it and whatnot. So I'm very pleased with how this onboarding has turned out. So it'll definitely continue for future hires.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you did a great job.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what we've found is kind of to your point is that the modules and the courses is great, but you need to supplement it, right? And so like we try to basically do a lot of different ways to teach people, because everybody's a little different, so I think some people can sit there and watch a video and walk away from the video and be like, yep, got it, I'm ready to go, give me a client. And some people watch the video and be like, they're just very analytical, and I don't get how this connects to this, and they have 1,000 questions. And then some people just can't even pay attention to the video, but once you start talking to them, they start asking you a ton of questions and they work together. So we try to, again, to your point, having the module is the first step, but then they have time to meet with me and ask questions. But then we also get them working behind the scenes on a client. And so the more ways we can teach people, we've had better success, because it's really not one size fits all, because that's where people start to fail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the benefits, and you said you aren't really offering health benefits yet, which makes sense for a company your size. But earlier you mentioned, being creative with benefits outside of that. So talk about some of the benefits that your employees might see working for you that really help create that culture.
Yeah. Well, first off, like right now, pretty much everyone is part-time. And so work flexibility is important. We don't have a set schedule for anyone. It's just like, just get the work done. And I'm assuming you're probably going to work 15 to 20 hours a week. And we just stay in like super duper communication when we check in of like, how is your workload? Are you feeling stressed out? Like, do we need to bring on more help? Or like right now with my most recent hire, who is part-time, we've been in discussions of making him full-time, because we have plans to continue to grow and he wants to grow into that controller position. So it's like kind of planning that, like co-creating that and planning it out together, and toggling things as we can. Just being really flexibility with time is probably the biggest one. I also encourage continuing education. So that's like also a job requirement.
Okay.
Even if they don't have their CPA license yet, it's like every week, at least listen to some sort of, relevant podcast, read a book, take a course. I'm happy to like pay for certain courses, send you to, if there's a conference that you feel you really want to go to, like let's make it happen once a year. I think that goes a long way too, because it shows like I'm investing in your career, even if you don't stay with me. Like you're going to learn all this stuff and get to take it with you, and not like white knuckling that and trying to like trap people, but like letting them know like you may move on one day, but you get to take all this education with you.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
so do you track that then? 'Cause you talked about like the podcast a week or a book, or do you kind of track what people are working on or what they're listening to, so that way you can have conversations with them?
We talk about like, we have a channel in Slack it's like a team building channel. And occasionally I'll pop in there and be like, let me know what you guys have learned this week. Like it's pretty casual right now. I'm sure as we grow, I may want to implement something more, I don't know, more tracky, but also like we just have a culture of trust as well. And it's like one of our core values is growth personally and professionally. So it's like, as long as you're like continuing to embody that. Like we just talk a lot on our one-on-ones, like sharing personal wins or professional wins, and so those kinds of things come up. People will be like, oh, I listened to this really cool podcast and I learned this thing, like I wanted to share it. Or I learned this in the course that I'm taking. I think it would really benefit our clients, stuff like that. Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
Waiting for Jody to ask a question here. What do you have here? It looked like he was thinking, so I didn't want to cut him off again.
No, I was thinking about that exact same thing. We do something very similar with like core values, and we've had book clubs and a bunch of different things. We obviously we provide education stipends so that they can do their CPE and hang out with each other when they want to, that type of thing. So we've done a lot of cool stuff like that. Never really thought about Jamie's point. Do you actually do you actually put a number on it? Do you actually track it? Do you actually do that? I don't think, I think, everybody's a grown up, right? That they should be able to do that themselves. When you bring somebody on, like you're saying, and you're saying, hey, that's a core value and that's something we kind of expect you to do. I would be super disappointed to find out, 6 months down the road that no one's doing it, or one or two people are doing it. And so I think the fact that you're just kind of chiming in with maybe what you've learned this week, I think that kind of helps and motivates people. Hey, if Serena's doing it, man, I probably should keep up on it as well, even if my schedule's busy this week or busier this week than normal. I think I think you're kind of leading by example in that regard, and by doing that, I'm not sure you really need to track it. I don't know, Jamie.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I'd say from the point of the question from my standpoint was a little less about Big Brother tracking. It was more of a learning, because you can learn through other people, right? So if three people are all reading the same book, then that might be me as a leader. I should probably be reading that book too, and then asking questions to them and being like, hey, you're reading this book, what did you get out of it? And really leaning on them a little bit so I can understand what they're learning and how they're learning it. And I think that's just to help expand the company's growth, because if three people read it and those three people learn all these things, it'd be a great recommendation for other people. Or if there's one podcast that everybody's listening to, and then maybe, hey, this is a good podcast for to when people come in, be like, hey, I definitely recommend listening to this podcast. So it's more of understanding what's out there and what's going on, as opposed to like, okay, I need to make sure that Serena's getting her one podcast in this week, because if not, she's not doing her job,
Right.
type thing. So that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we handle it. Yeah.
Do you have a lot of good conversations about that then, because of since growth is your one of your core values? Do you feel like you have a lot of strong concepts and like our conversations, and then every week, like you're like, oh, we're such a better firm because we're having these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really like stopped to consider it. It's just like it's so like built in that like we're constantly like sharing little snippets on our team calls or in our one-on-ones and stuff, that I just like I have a really good pulse with everyone. Since our team is so small, I know as we grow that's going to be more of a challenge, but it's my job to like you said, lead by example and make sure that the next leadership team is able to kind of have keep that same pulse, if you will. So that'll probably be my next challenge of like, I'm pretty like maxed out on direct reports at this point. So it's like any more people we hire, they have to report to the next layer. Yeah.
So where do you see yourself going then? So right now, you at the size you're at, and you're at the number of people you're at. Like if we're having the same podcast recording 5 years from now, what is this podcast going to sound like, and what is your business going to sound like?
That's exciting to think about. I would say 5 years from now, the goal is to definitely like triple the team, maybe like merge with another firm with similar values. We're zero focused, like we only work in zero. So I could see potentially in 5 years merging with like a twin firm that only does QuickBooks Online or something, and just like maximizing that,
expanding it that way.
Yeah.
Great. And I think the thing with the growth and with as you expand, the interesting learning points for you will be is keeping that culture as you grow. Because I know, I'm sure Jody can tell you, like, there are certain thresholds, there are certain people parts where you're like, okay, it was really easy to keep this culture when we were under 10, but now we've just went from 10 to 20. How do I keep this culture? And then you go from 20 to 40, and it's like at different points you hit it. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, because again, everything you said, I'm like, oh, maybe I should go work for Serena, but I don't think Jody liked that. But it sounds like it's really,
no.
a really awesome culture that you're building there. But I think that the key will be is keeping that as you grow.
Yeah, I think the key is
absolutely.
really keeping it intentional, right? Being super intentional with it. Yeah. I mean, having meetings set aside every week to deal with your team meetings. I think that's important. Never missing one is super important. So the team knows that, hey, this is a kind of an expectation. We've got to, and then having something fun, with the meetings. Like we have our team meeting, once a week, and it's typically a joke of the day, followed by fun facts, followed by someone brings a topic. And so we have, can you imagine having 60, 70 people in a Zoom meeting, and we're talking about nothing about business, maybe a few things about, some important topics that might be coming down, like updates to software, something like that at the very beginning. But that's maybe 5 or 10 minutes tops, and then the rest of it's just simply hanging out and really kind of developing that culture. And I think that's super, super, super important, more so than we think. And when we bring new people in, they don't really, it's kind of weird. They don't know what to expect. And they come into the meeting and they're pretty much like, this is kind of different.
Yeah.
But I think that embodies our culture. And it sounds like you do a very similar thing.
Yeah. Our meetings are probably more like focused on the work at this point because we're small, but that was going to be my question to you is like, do you ever have new employees or even existing employees that get to where they're like, this meeting is pointless. We don't accomplish anything on it.
I don't know, Jamie, what do you think?
Well, I think with the meetings we have that where we are trying to get something done, it is really important to, and that's why we've definitely tinkered with our structure of our meetings to make sure that things are being done, and we do a rating at the end where people get to go through and say, okay, how'd this meeting go? Did it meet your expectations? And so we make sure that we talk about that every week. So I think for those meetings that is the point, then it is really important to make sure you are following a structure. But to Jody's point, our all team meeting, the point of that meeting is just to relax, have fun, and just to get to know people. And so, like, honestly, some people probably pop into that meeting and you're like, oh, right, here we go again. I got to hear Jody tell from the joke book, or I got to have Jamie ask a silly question. So, like, I think, but ultimately we make sure that people know that that's the purpose of that meeting is hey, we are a work from home environment. We need to be intentional about getting to know each other, because if not, then it won't happen. And so I think people understand that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then we kind of go from that meeting to even more so to like our team retreats, in which we have the team all get together and just hang out for 3 or 4 days, a very set agenda, and it's one of those things that again, the purpose isn't really to necessarily learn, although that's something that you want to definitely involve in it in some way, but it's just more to get to know each other on a personal level, and kind of bring those relationships and build those relationships while you're there and bring them back to the remote environment. Because again, when you're working with only 1 or 2 people, that's how big your company is. But when you're working with, when you bring into the retreat, you got to meet everybody. Then you start asking questions from everyone else during your regular day-to-day work. And it just makes that experience even better and bigger. Because again, people stay at work because they meet friends, right? They make friends at work. And that's kind of where the friendship starts. It's great to have a remote friendship like this, but it's super cool when you get to hang out and get to know you even better, on a personal level. And that's what the team retreat does. So it kind of goes from the intentional focus in the meetings to even more intentional to, spending some time together at a retreat or a CP, some sort of event where you can hang out with each other and get to know each other on a personal level.
Yeah, that's on my list for this year is getting the whole team together. Just have to figure out where.
It's gonna be fun. You're gonna love it. Yeah, it's a great experience. The first time, like I said, I remember Jody and I. The first time we met, we were speaking at a conference together. And so just looking for him in the airport, and just, again, I worked with him for like 3 or 4 months. It's like you already know each other because of the culture we created. So it'll be fun once you have that first on-site retreat or retreat together. So, well, with that said, we are actually right about time here. So I'm going to give both you guys a final thought on kind of what people should be thinking about after listening to this podcast. So we'll start with you, Serena.
I would say like it feels elusive if you haven't really done the work, but really trying to figure out what you want your company core values to be. And I think the easiest way for me to do that was to really reflect on what my core values are as a person and what kind of culture I wanted to create. And it took me a couple years to really fine tune it, and they may change too. But once I nailed that down, I was really able to attract the right people.
Yeah, and I think once you attracted those people, right, and then it's the point is that maintain that culture, maintain those core values throughout your entire stay with those folks. You know, they could be there for a year, they could be there for 2 years, they could be there for 10, 15 years. Who knows how long they're going to be, but you want them to be the kind of the ambassadors of those core values, right? So they're taking on your core values that you created and then becoming the ambassador and really kind of bringing those core values to life. And it's kind of cool going from where you're at to where we're at right now. Is, you know, people have brought up to, hey, you guys really truly follow your core values, which is really cool. And it sounds like you definitely have, your team definitely believes in the exact same thing. And I think that's really important because core values aren't just there to put on the wall and have as decoration or, you know, on your website to make it look cool, but it's something you really need to live in and really embrace. And I think that's what it sounds like that's what you've done with your team, and definitely kudos for that.
Yeah, that was the biggest game changer for sure.
I definitely agree with everything. Yeah, definitely agree with everything Jody said there. No, and you as well, Serena. I think I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing more about your company. And like I said, excited to see you grow because you've started at the right place, right? You started with understanding who you are and who you want to be, and that it makes it so much easier to hire. It makes it so much easier to grow. It makes it so much easier to find clients if you understand that first, where a lot of companies, I think, kind of get backed into it. It's like, oh, I have 27 clients and I'm doing all these things. Now it's time to figure out who I am. And then it's like almost too late.
Yeah.
Not too late because you can always make adjustments, but it's a lot of work at that point. So love what you're doing and excited to hear how it keeps going.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, of course. Talk to you soon.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.